One of the riskiest purchases you can make as a buyer is purchasing something off the plan. And if you're not familiar with what off the plan is, we are going to discuss that in today's episode. Welcome back to the Own It podcast. My name's Dion. And in today's episode, we're discussing off the plan purchases and the risks that are associated to them. So first of all, let's understand what an off the plan purchase is. Off the plan purchases is when you buy something that needs to be constructed. It might be during construction, it might be almost completed construction, or it might not even be built yet. It's purchasing something that is yet to be completed, essentially is the easiest way to describe it. Whereas if you're buying a standard residential house or apartment or townhouse, whatever, 99% of the time it's completed, you can walk through it, you can see what you're purchasing. When it comes to off the plans, this isn't always the case. Often you're purchasing something and you're purchasing it to be potentially something is probably the best way to describe it. So we're going to discuss a little bit about that because they are highly risky. And some people take an extremely strong stance on it where they say never buy off the plan. And that stance is probably too firm. But I would also say 9 out of 10 purchases off the plan aren't always the best purchase. When it comes to off the plan, you only really want to buy off the plan if it's from a highly reputable developer. It's in a small complex. Like a good off the plan purchase, for example, might be someone who's building a house, a brand new house, and it's a couple days away from being complete. So you can pretty much walk through the whole thing. You can see the whole thing. It's a reputable builder. You know that. So that's a safer purchase than an apartment complex that doesn't even have the foundations built. That is highly risky. Now, why would people buy off the plan? That's normally a question. Well, it's normally new, shiny. The idea of having something brand new is appealing to a lot of buyers, but also there's a lot of incentives that, for example, in Victoria, we have for buyers to purchase off the plan. That can be stamp duty relief. That can be additional funds allocated towards the purchase in multiple schemes. You are heavily incentivized to purchase off the plan in Victoria, which is extremely scary and risky because they are also one of the most risky purchases you could make. I'm currently jumping into today's episode just to ask a massive favor. If you could please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, we would greatly appreciate it. Now, back to today's episode. So why are they so risky? There's so many reasons. One of the main reasons is sort of the value of the property. Now, quite often off the plan, especially with apartments, I would say, off the plan apartments are the riskiest purchase you could make when it comes to off the plan. And they're so risky because to understand why, you have to understand what creates value in a property. Land underpins value. Of course, the structure on the land is worth something, but that something is all you're buying when it comes to apartments. There's no land attached to that title. It is purely a apartment complex, bricks and mortar that you're buying with a very, very, very small claim to the land that sits on, which is very different to like a 60s or 70s apartment complex where there's maybe 8 to 12 or 16 apartments that sit on 1,000 square meters. This is where you have hundreds of apartments that sit on a very small block of land. So if there's no land that drives the value in your property, you ultimately only have depreciating bricks and mortar. Your apartment that was brand new is only going to get older. It's not going to be brand new forever. So it's only going to depreciate. That's why they're so risky when it comes to the value, because you might buy it for 500,000, but in 10 years when you go to sell it, there's no land driving the value. Land is what generates the value in a lot of properties. There's no land because it's an apartment, and the apartment's only depreciated. It's only gotten worse. So you can buy it for 500,000 and sell it 10 years later for 450, and that's what we see all the time. More than half of the apartments that sell in Melbourne sell for a loss, which is crazy. And most of those were purchased off the plan because you sold this dream or you sold this promise that they're going to perform well, which quite often is not the case. So understanding that's one of the biggest risks when it comes to off-plan. Another big risk is sort of the developers or the builders' reliability, how reputable they are. Because quite often these brand new apartments, you've never seen it. It doesn't exist when you buy it. So how do you know it's going to be good construction? Quite often you don't know if it's going to be good construction or not, which is why we have so many that have cladding problems. There's so many with like car stacker problems or fire system problems, or there's just a whole range of problems that we see in apartment complexes 5-10 years on from when they were built. But you only know this after you've been living there for 5 or 10 years. once you've already committed to a contract. So again, that's why they're highly risky, because you do not know the condition of the property. And who pays for that? Who pays if there's a safety fire system special levy that they need to raise to fix a problem? You pay for that. And I see this all the time. People buy an apartment for $500,000 off the plan. It's only worth $450,000, and then they have to pay for a special levy because the developer didn't do something correctly from the start. This is why they're so risky. There's so much unknown that comes with them. Another problem is because there's so many incentives for people to buy off the plan, quite often developers put this on top. So an apartment that might only really be worth $450,000, because there's stamp duty relief and all these other incentives for you to buy, they actually put a little bit more on the price. And they go, oh, it's $480,000. But someone goes, oh, I don't have to pay this and this and this. So it's actually for $480, it's a great buy. Even when it's not, even when it's overpriced. So sometimes your valuation can come in short because it's not actually worth that, but it's sold to you that it is worth that because you don't have to pay all these additional things. And because there's such an oversupply of apartments that are already on the market, so if you go to the CBD, if you go to Docklands, if you go to anywhere like that, there's so many apartments that are on the market and no incentives to buy apartments that are already existing, but plenty of incentives to purchase apartments that are off the plan. You find that there's all these buyers purchasing off the plan and buying all these brand new properties. But when you go to sell that property later, there's no incentives for buyers to purchase older apartments. So why would they buy yours? They'll just go buy the new shiny apartment. So again, there's an oversupply with limited demand. That's never good for the growth in a property. So when it comes to buying off the plan, you just have to consider multiple things. What will happen to the growth of this property? Because if it's an off the plan apartment, there is a very high chance you will lose money on it, which is never a good position to be in. And that's not factoring in the opportunity cost of not purchasing something else that will grow in value. So you have to understand there's a big risk when it comes to your capital growth in the property. The risk of the developer not following through or building something to the right standard and you having to pay for that bill is high. Expensive body corporate fees for pools, gyms, lifts, all these things, car stackers, will be your responsibility to pay for as well. And so when you look at all these things, is it really worth buying them because you get a stamp duty discount or you get an additional $10,000 funding to purchase them? My answer, no. You're better off buying something safe with land. Buy an older unit or buy a boutique apartment complex where there's only 12 or 16 in the block, the small rise ones. They're not making any more of them. They can't oversupply them because they're not making any more of them. They're really good purchasing. They actually perform very well over time. But what consistently doesn't perform well are off-the-plan apartments. They're highly risky. So if you're considering purchasing them, you should be considering other options as well. Hopefully this gives you a bit more information and hopefully I can save someone from making the mistake of buying off the plan. In saying all that, just remember, not all off the plans are a scam. There are some actual okay off the plan buys, but there are still really high risks associated to it. Hope this helps. We'll catch you in the next episode. Have a great week.